Breaking news from the stadium tonight as an anonymous fan foot the bill for 55,000 hot dogs, bringing that sweet tubed meat to everyone in attendance.
Free dogs! Yeah!
55,000 hot dogs? What does that even cost?
While the identity of this Frankfurter philanthropist remains anonymous, their all-beefy generosity will go down in history.
The new Mega Millions. More to win means more to give. How you spend it is up to you. Yeah!
For game odds and details, visit sceducationlottery.com.
Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.
Imagine being a 12-year-old kid. You're feeling under the weather. You've actually been sick for a little while. And your mom hands you a magazine that reignites your passion for a galaxy far, far away. That moment changed everything for our guest this week, Mark Newbold, who spent decades since living and breathing Star Wars. Mark shares his incredible journey from a young fan to editor-in-chief of Fantha Tracks. He's revealing unforgettable stories from his interviews with absolutely iconic figures and insights into the evolution of fandom. So whether you're a dad who's looking to relive those childhood memories, or you're just a diehard Star Wars enthusiast, you're not going to want to miss this conversation. Stick around as we explore the magic of Star Wars through Mark Newbold's eyes. This is Tatooine Sons.
Welcome to Tatooine Sons, a Star Wars podcast, the only fan podcast to name a canon Star Wars creature and to be endorsed by the writer and director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson. Get ready to explore a galaxy far, far away, across the generations. Here is your host, David the Bowtie Jedi Guy, along with his special guest, recognized Star Wars insider and editor-in-chief of Fantha Tracks, Mark Newbold.
You may fire when ready.
All right, Mark, you have been immersed in the Star Wars galaxy for decades now with it. What was that one moment, that pivotal experience that kind of cemented your lifelong obsession here with Star Wars? Was it a specific toy, a viewing, an experience, something else entirely? What was that for you?
It's a really good question because I think people get asked what was the first thing that got you into it, but what was the thing that cemented it? It's kind of a different question because there's the assumption that just seeing it initially was enough to hook you forever. And it's not, because so many people sort of step off and come back or whatever. I would say, I'd say the thing that cemented it was I had a brief period, sort of late 70s into the early 80s, where I still loved it, but I wasn't as madly into it. And so I think I stopped. I was a big reader as a kid, but I think for whatever reason, I think I had a falling out with a friend or something, and it was just one of those sort of caught in the crossfire type things. Hey, you love Star Wars, and I was like, I don't like Star Wars anymore. So I left Star Wars alone for a little bit. And then I think, in fact, I know I was ill and I was off school, and Mom knew that the best way to sort of cheer me up was generally to give me a magazine or a comic or something to read just to keep you busy. You know, obviously decades before the internet and all that stuff would keep us busy. And just sitting on the sofa, feeling sorry for myself, reading, I think it was probably Star Wars Monthly or something like that back then, and absolutely loved it. So this would be about 82, I would say. So I'd probably stop reading it for a couple of years. And then I'd started doing fanfic. So I decided then, with this specific issue of the monthly, the UK monthly, that I was going to go and write a sequel story to it. Not quite cottoning on that next month Marvel would actually release the sequel story to it, or the reprint of the American version. And so I wrote my own sort of little fanfic story, what happened to, Lando and Leia and Luke and all those characters, on the hunt for Han Solo, and started doing fanfic. And I think ever since then, I can pretty confidently say that there hasn't been a day since that I haven't either written Star Wars, being fanfic in pre-internet days, or done audio when I went through a phase of doing fan audio. up to fanzines and then websites and right through to today. So I'd probably say the cementing moment was feeling ill and my mum buying me a copy of Star Wars Monthly.
That's so cool. How old were you?
In 82, I'd been 10 or 11.
That's so cool.
So I'm 54 now, so that's a long old haul.
It's funny. You've seen so much in Star Wars fandom evolve over the years and change dramatically. What are some of the biggest differences that you see between how you experienced Star Wars as that 12-year-old reading a monthly magazine and as a kid, and how kids you feel like are experiencing it today, other than, I mean, obviously the internet and things like that, but what are some of the differences you notice?
Well, I think I've said this before. I think when we were kids, and this is, when I say we, I mean all of us individually, because it would be it'd be the same for you. Our internet, our World Wide Web was the playground, pretty much.
Absolutely.
And so generally, unless you went away on holiday for a week to the coast and there was a Star Wars arcade machine, you'd end up playing that and talking to the kids that were playing it as well. Generally, your friendship group was, that was the World Wide Web. So the difference then to the difference now is that I couldn't envisage. Okay, so in 1983, I had a letter printed in Return of the Jedi Weekly, which was the kind of came a couple of iterations after that Star Wars Monthly that I did, that I read, and I sent the letter in. And back in the day, you would put your address. So there's a copy of Star Wars Weekly, issue 11, August 1983. Not like I can't remember it. And there's my little letter with my old address when I lived in Birtwood, which is where I live now. I moved back there a few years ago. And my fanfic name, Jan Lamona. So that was my character I created off the back of feeling ill and sorry for myself. And so I got a few fan letters from people who thought Jan was actually Jan as in Janet or Janice.
Okay.
So all these people thought I was a girl. But the point being was that being a Star Wars fan then felt a lot more maybe personal, because not everyone at school was into Star Wars. You would see Star Wars everywhere back in the mid-80s, especially leading up to Jedi. But I think as it's moved forward, it's become so much more universal and global that, we mentioned before we started recording, I was in Japan for Celebration, which was a great treat. And I never thought I'd ever see Japan. So I'm, thrilled to have done that. But I could have been stood on an elevator, in a lift, in a hotel lobby. Loads of people there that I knew, but loads of people that I didn't, and just start chatting about Star Wars. So I think the big difference is now I wrote a lot back then, an awful lot of fiction, and a tiny amount of people read it or have ever read it. Later on, it went onto a site around called Lightsaber, which was like a fanfic site, and that sort of blossomed into the new stuff that I do now. But I never assumed that many people read it. I just didn't think people would read it. Whereas now I know if I'm writing something on Fantha or something for, I don't know, Insider or ILM or whatever, that a lot more eyes are on it. So that's a difference for me personally. But generally, I think it's just become so much more, it's such a part of the zeitgeist, but it's a permanent fixture. It's not gone away. So a Star Wars reference, any kind of oblique Star Wars reference, is going to catch on with people. They're going to get what you're talking about. May the whatever be with you. They know what you're saying. They know, they get the construction of the joke. I think that's the big difference to me. But then maybe that's me as an adult looking back with different eyes to me as a 12-year-old. Because when I was 12, and I still am Team Star Wars, but I was like silly Team Star, to the point I wanted Chewie to rip E.T.'s arms off because E.T. took more money than Star Wars. That's how silly Star Wars fan I know how crazy into it I was back then. So I would say that's the difference. It's just so much more out there than it was back in the day.
It's fun to hear how, as a 12-year-old writing fanfic, evolved to where this is what you do every day. Like, you're writing constantly for Fantha and all of these other amazing publications with it. It's incredible. Can you share maybe a particular memorable or surprising piece of Star Wars lore, Star Wars history, something behind the scenes or whatever that you uncovered while you were writing about these things, that you think it was like, when you think about like these types of moments, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I got to be a part of that or experience that?
The first thing that comes to mind was I interviewed Rick McCullum about 2007, that sort of time.
Okay.
Which was all so as I said, I ran a site called Lightsaber for a long time, which started off as a site called Wire Zone, and then when Phantom was coming, we changed the name to Lightsaber because it was more of a Star Wars name. And it started off small, and by the time we'd finished Lightsaber in 2009, we were getting 1 million hits a year, so we were doing pretty well for a site. Bear in mind, there was way bigger sites than that back in the day, and many more sites back in the day. There's not actually that many Star Wars dedicated sites now compared to how they used to be. It's all on social media stuff now. But I got quite a good reputation for doing interviews in the sort of the mid-2000s. This just around the time I was starting with Insider. And I'd interviewed, I might be getting my slightly in the wrong order, but I remember I'd interviewed Anthony Daniels, and he said I came recommended by Lucasfilm. So I knew that I was on their radar, which was nice. And then I interviewed Rick McCullum, and had a great interview with Rick, and he set me up an interview with Irvin Kershner, which I'll never be able to thank him enough for because that was amazing. But during the interview with Rick, it came out that and I hope I'm remembering this right, his stepfather was Michael York, who was Basil Exposition in the Austin Powers films, and
right.
And he's in the Four Musketeers and Logan's Run and all these great films. And I had no idea. So this completely, it's unrelated to Star Wars really, but this little bit of trivia, I thought that is the coolest bit of trivia.
That is cool.
I did not know this. That's the one thing that comes to mind. I mean, I know because I'm sad, I keep track of these things. So I think I've done 750 Star Wars related interviews with about 450 different people. So many of them, interviewed numerous times for various things. So every now and again, something will come up that, wow, I didn't know that. But that Michael York thing has just always stayed in my head because I know I talk a lot, you see. I'm very aware that I rabbit on a lot. And exposition kind of seems to be kind of a mansplaining, some might call it. But it just seems relevant to me when this thing starts going. So yeah, Michael York being Rick McCullum's stepdad.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's you would have never thought that.
No,
they don't even feel like they're the same world at all.
Not remotely. No, especially when Rick gets going. I mean, what a character!
Oh yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. When you mentioned interviewing 450 plus people in the time that you've been doing this.
Yeah.
What was there? Was there I mean, obviously you talk about Anthony Daniels, you talk about Rick McCullum, Irvin Kershner, all this. What was the interview that you're like, when you got it, you were like, oh my gosh, this really happened?
There's a couple. I mean, the first time with Anthony was nerve-wracking because he does come with a reputation of potentially being a little bit prickly. And I've interviewed him, I think it's 6 times now, and every time has been a joy. And I don't want to jinx myself. I'll risk jinxing myself by saying we do seem to get on really well. And the last couple of times he's requested me to interview him for various things, which is nice. And every time we have fun, I've been to his house a couple of times, and so it's a nice, what a vanilla word, but it's been a pleasurable, pleasurable experience, and I've learned something new every time, and it's just been interesting, and we just have a nice chat, and it's very, very easy. I've jinxed it now. Next one's going to be awful, but there you go, at the risk of jinxing it. No doubt Kershner was just mind-blowing, just to Empire's my favourite film, so to think that I've spent half an hour talking to the guy that directed that was amazing. I don't know. There's been a couple. I mean, Favreau was pretty cool. That was a couple of years ago. It was a round table type thing. So it was at some hotel in London when Mando season 3 was out, and it was myself and Phil Roberts from Future of the Force and James from Jedi News. Well, I used to be with Jedi News, so it was the 3 of us sat around a table with Favreau. And not knowing, I didn't really know much about him. He's a good actor, so he can come over as the most avuncular, friendly type guy in the world. And
but you don't know what he's going to be like in the real world, right?
Literally that. You don't know. It could be an act. It could be a front. Wow, it was not a front. He was so nice. He apologised for only giving us 20 minutes. He said he wanted to talk more. It was such a nice atmosphere. And then we got to the end of it, and I don't know if you know, he has one of these Mando challenge coin things that he carries around and hands out to various people. And so at the end of the conversation, I slapped down a Fantha patch, and James puts down the Jedi News patch, and Phil gave him something, and he went, 1 minute, and he went out of the room and came back with 3 coins, which is like, what a cool thing to do. So that one's always going to sort of rank pretty highly. But quite often it's the... not innocuous, that's not the right word, but we do a lot. We're very lucky here in the UK. A lot of the cast and crew are British.
Right.
So this past weekend I was at an event called Andmore down in the New Forest, where we go quite regularly for a vintage show called Farthest From. And Dave Tree, who used to be my co-host on Making Tracks back in the day, he puts on these amazing events in a tiny, tiny village hall. And this time he had 13 guests. There was like 3 guys from ILM. He had Luke Hull, the production designer, and all the guys from the Creature Shop, Lee Towersey, those kind of guys. 13 people. Me and Mark sort of interchanged between the two of us doing the panels. And just moments like that when you just sat with these incredible, one, they're giving you their time. 2, they're giving you their knowledge in a way that we can digest, because especially the ILM guys. I mean, I write for ILM now, but so much of it is just straight over your head because it's techie stuff. I'm the least technical person on it's amazing I got my computer working for this. So I'm not a techie person at all. So I can write about stuff. So they frame it in a way that's like, I get that. That makes sense. I understand that. So it's moments like that when they're kind of coming down to my level. I always try and I know I'm a knowledgeable Star Wars fan in certain ways, but in that way, I'm really, really not. And so I always appreciate when they can just pass it down and frame it in a way that's like, well, I get it. If I get it, other people will get it. So I think sometimes it's moments like that that are really, really cool. So, But I really can't think of many outside of written. Sometimes they're written interviews, correspondence, email correspondence type interviews, and they're not particularly satisfied. They're good to have, but they just get the job done. When you're actually speaking to somebody and there's the interaction and an answer comes back from a fairly straightforward question that sort of leads on to another question. Wow, you say that, but what about this? That's what I like when you really get into out in the weeds. That's the fun part of it.
You talk about Anthony Daniels and his sort of reputation for being potentially prickly with interviewers and press and that type of situation. It's funny how it's become sort of a shtick between him and specifically Anthony Carboni at Celebration, and how they play off of each other. And you've been involved with Celebration since the very beginning. Is that correct? Like the very start, or
first European one? The first European, 2007. Yeah.
That's amazing. And you've been on pretty much every podcast stage since they started doing that?
Yeah, I've been very lucky, really. I think from what I remember, they did podcast panels on the fan stages, but they didn't start the podcast stage
until a specific
Anaheim.
Podcast stage.
Yeah, so an actual specific podcast stage. So luckily, I've been to all the celebrations, and through like Jedi News and now Fantha, I've either done Radio 1138 or Making Tracks or one of the other shows that I do on all of them. So yeah, and because I was running the stage at a few of them, I kept track of who'd done what and how many shows had done how many slots on stages, and then sat back and looked and thought, blimey, I'm the only one that's done every single one. And I honestly didn't know that going in. I thought there must be other people that have done every single one, but there wasn't. So so that's a nice little feather in my cap.
So cool.
Again,
what's that like for you?
They won't pick me for LA now.
You're one of the good guys in the space, man. As long as you're fine. It's fun. Celebration is it's such a different experience from any other fan type convention.
Yeah.
With it, but you're a Star Trek guy too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
With it, have you been to have you been to I'm assuming Star Trek conventions and those types of things. Are they similar for you as a fan? Do they feel that does the environment feel differently? And what are the similarities and the differences for you?
It's weird. The first proper, I'm a big comics guy, so all the stuff I went to in the 80s was comic marts and comic conventions and stuff like that. My first proper waggle the air quotes, proper convention was the 33rd British Sci-Fi Convention, Sol 3 in Birmingham. Should have had Will Wheaton come, but he broke his ankle skateboarding. It was weird. He got the biggest cheer of the weekend because it's Wesley. Shut up, Wesley. And so Barry Ingham came. He was a guest actor in season 2 of Next Gen, and it's very different. It's an older crowd. It's a more thoughtful crowd. Because Star Trek's a kind of a deeper cut in a way than Star Wars, and I appreciate that more. It wasn't. I don't know how to say. More people who feel very at home with their own people. That's the way of saying it. With Star Trek, there's people who you can see in everyday life are kind of loners, are kind of a little bit isolated, and they're into their thing and they love it dearly. But they come to a show or an event like a Star Trek convention, and that's totally their tribe. So it's a bit like walking into a rock gig, and like 9 out of 10 people are wearing Metallica, Maiden, Black, all the big bands, but you're the guy that turns up in a Wolfsbane t-shirt that no one's ever heard of. And it's all those guys together. So that was the thing I felt with Trek. It felt very much more of a finding your tribe type of vibe, whereas Star Wars is so out there. It's no shock seeing somebody walking down the street in a Star Wars t-shirt, but slightly different with the Trek one. So it's very different there. Yeah, I've been lucky with Trek as well. I wrote for StarTrek.com for a while, which I really enjoyed, and the official mag, which is now finished, which was great fun. And actually got a cover article with that one because I interviewed Shatner, which was very cool back in the day. But yeah, they're different. I did some stage hosting at Destination Star Trek, which was like the official European event. In the UK and in Germany, and that was a lot of fun. But they are different. I mean, Star Wars is undoubtedly just a bigger thing, so there's no real Star Trek equivalent to Celebration other than the official Trek convention at the Rio in Vegas, which I've never been to, and it's totally on my bucket list to go to. That's probably as close as you'll get, and because it's Trek and it's a different kind of game, they'll have whereas Celebration will have 15, 20 guests. And of course, Celebration could have 100 guests if they wanted to. It's a different model. Whereas at Trek, they'll quite happily have 50 guests. It's a different thing. I love them dearly. I love them both dearly. But because they're so different, there's plenty of similarities. And outside, what's on the screen, obviously ILM, and you could go on forever. JJ, Michael Giacchino, half the cast of Trek have been in Star Wars in voice roles in different ways. So there's loads of overlap, but they're different enough that they both keep me very invested. But yeah, Star Wars is definitely the predominant thing. I got to a point where I was trying for a couple of years. I was trying to do both and trying to have a foot in both camps, and I realised pretty quickly that I love Trek, but Star Wars that's the thing that takes the time that I'm really invested in. And so I kind of step back from the Trek thing a little bit, and I'm more of a fan of Trek now than trying to be actively involved.
What is it about Trek that you love so much?
I think when there's a tangible reason that evolved into a proper reason, if that makes sense. When Jedi finished and George says, that's it, we're done. No more Star Wars. I might make the prequels in the 90s, but for now, that's it. And 7, 8, and 9, he pretty much wrote off for the longest time. So I'd kind of I'd started collecting or subscribing to Fantha Tracks, which was a nightmare to do from the UK. Postal orders and sending it off. It was really a real pain. And I got more and more into the behind the scenes stuff. So I was starting to read in Fantha Tracks about, Phil Tippett and Dennis Muren and, Bill Nicholson and Bruce Nicholson and all these different people, and finding that really interesting. Back in the day when you'd read a magazine and then go back to the first page and read it again, which we never have time to do these days. And so knowing that, I knew ILM were moving on from Jedi to Temple of Doom. But Indy, to me, Indy and Star Wars are the same thing. I consider Indy and Star Wars as it's all together. And then Star Trek 3, and then Back to the Future, and just that whole run through the 80s of the Spielberg, the Amblin stuff, and all of that. So I was really into that. When Next Gen gets announced in 86 rather, I was reading a magazine called Starburst, which years later I ended up writing for, which was cool. And they mentioned that, there's a new Star Trek series coming. It's set 100 years on from the original one. It stars a captain called Julian Picard, and there might be a Klingon on the bridge, and blah, blah, blah. And they mention all this stuff, and absolutely fascinated. But one of the things that it said was visual effects or special effects, as they called it then, by Industrial Light and Magic. Well, that was the big hook, because by then I'd seen Star Trek 3 numerous times. I'd seen Star Trek 4 on VHS. Never seen it in the big screen. I still need to do that. Got it on VHS. Love Star Trek 4. Such a great film. So beautifully made and so witty and fun and warm. Got through Star Trek 5, which has good moments. I've got to say, I think when I interviewed Shatner, I had the chance to tell Shatner, because I don't think he gets much love for 5, and I think he knows why. And I said, I've got to say, I think you gave DeForest Kelley his greatest ever moment in Star Trek.
Wow.
The moment where he finds out that he could have saved his father if he'd waited, the whole tortured soul moment, which he was very grateful for. So that was a nice moment for me. And Star Trek 6 I think that's one of the greatest sequels to anything ever. So I was I was all in by then. But once Next Gen came along, I loved the Kirk stuff. I would watch those. I had the video box set, the first 5 films. I would watch them regularly. Next Gen's what really got me into it. And so just connecting to the characters. I'm British. You got a British. Oh no, he's supposed to be French. He's British. So you got a British captain. So there's all these other little elements going through that show that were just so captivating and so brilliantly done. And it's funny. I think Star Wars has almost become like a soap opera in many ways. Because of the nature of needing more content, needing more. You've got to invest in the characters and their interpersonal relationships, which is what Andor did so well. As much as you've got to catch on to the action and the history and the placement of these stories. Trek's always been a soap opera. And I love soap operas. We've got loads here in the UK. Every night, me and the wife are watching soaps every evening, because we are that easily pleased. But Star Trek is one of those. It has got that soapy element. I think that's sometimes used as a detrimental thing, but when it's done right, it's actually very engaging, no pun intended. And so that's why I got into Trek. And then DS9 did it brilliantly, and Voyager did it really well. Enterprise, not so much, but I do enjoy Enterprise. And now we're in a modern era that's still very engaging and watchable. Lower Decks is the best thing they've done in the last 10 years, I think, in Trek. But nevertheless, they're very different, but they both capture me and grab me in different ways, because Trek is the future of us. So Star Trek can go, I heard this song by the Beastie Boys the other day.
Oh yeah, Star Wars is a galaxy far, far away a long time ago. This Star Trek is our future, is the way that you view it, yeah.
That's it. So I think Star Trek can handle and tackle quite unashamedly like today issues in a way that Star Wars, it feels shoehorned in when they do it. It's not an organic thing. Also, Star Trek is about finding these different tribes, if you like, and making or hoping, not saying making, hoping that they work together, wanting a union, making a federation, wanting these people everyone to step forward together into a better future. Star Wars isn't necessarily about that. Star Wars is already first contacts every day, happening all the time.
Right.
They're all spacefaring nations. And so, go back to the cantina in the original film. There's the giant cricket stood next to the Wolfman, next to the astronaut, the Wookiee, the Jedi, the walrus face guy. Everything in a row at that bar in one scene in Star Wars tells you that differences that we get really caught up on mean nothing to them. So in the galaxy far, far away, it's not as important. Of course it's important today, but it's not as important to point out these differences, because those guys don't see it. They're not seeing the differences the way we sort of micro in on these differences. In Star Trek, completely. Let's dig into all of that, because Star Trek's a parable. It's kind of it's a morality tale. It doesn't necessarily, the best Trek anyway, certainly the Trek of the 90s, just lays it out for you as a viewer and says, we're trusting you've got the intelligence to go away and think about this. We're not banging you on the head with the rights or the wrongs. We're laying it out for you to go, you know what? And I love that about Trek. It treats the audience with respect and as a thoughtful audience.
That's amazing. When you look back at Star Wars now, in the Disney era, since the acquisition, what and it can be TV, film, animation, comics, books, whatever, games, whatever. What has most surprised you? Which release has been the one that's been the most surprising to you?
That's a good question. Wow, I'll give you a straight answer off the top of my head. I think the thing that surprised me the most is Solo. And what surprised me the most, speaking today in, summer of 2025, is that we're not about to get Solo 4. I was convinced.
Thank you.
That show, that film was so well done, so well observed, so beautifully made, so well cast that, we're away now. We're getting the Han Solo. My favourite trilogy is the Han Solo trilogy, the Brian Daley books from 79 and 80. So that really, I mean, we talked about cementing things. That was a monster hook for me because all Brian Daley was given was Han, Chewie, the Falcon. But that's pretty much it. Yeah, you can mention Jabba the Hutt, but you're never going to see him. You can mention Darth Vader, you're never going to see him. So they just had to go and make this amazing new part of the galaxy, which is kind of what we did with our fanfic. We did what Daly did and just set it in our own little part of the galaxy, and which is canon, by the way. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And so there was this amazing opportunity to tell all these unique stories, and Solo, Donald Glover ready to play Lando and like nailing it completely, and Alden Ehrenreich, who was, I mean, he's not Harrison Ford, but he is Han Solo. And so I don't know what I don't know what the disconnect was. I know Star Wars historians will look back and go, well, it kind of got caught in the backwash of the Last Jedi controversy, if you want to call it a controversy, and all of that. And it certainly should have come out in December. It should have been the counter programming to Mary Poppins 2, not what Iger did and keeping them apart. That was a big mistake. But yeah, that's probably the most surprising thing, how good that film was. I watch it regularly, and how on earth are we not, at the very least, into 3 seasons of a Disney Plus spin-off or 3 or 4 films in? I do not get that.
I agree. I loved the Solo film and the story. I thought for sure they set up, some things with Kira and Maul that were going to be happening in the future.
All that Crimson Dawn stuff.
And you could bring in some Boba Fett stuff in there, Crimson Dawn, all of that. You could have really had some fun. Enfys Nest, there was a whole storyline there, which we've never seen with play out in anything really with it. That's amazing. When you look back on, again, kind of going back to where we started with this, decades of taking something that was a 12-year-old kid that loved this galaxy and was writing his own stories and that kind of thing about it. And now you've spent years and years and years living in this space, doing this professionally, interviewing amazing people, going all over the world now to be a part of this crazy fandom that has infiltrated every part of society with it. When you look back on that, if you could say anything to that 12-year-old kid that's looking at that, sitting on the couch with that magazine that his mom gave him to occupy his time when he wasn't feeling good with it, what would you tell that kid?
I think I'd tell myself, just keep doing what you're doing. And by that I mean, before I started fan fiction, I would read it, and then I would try and do a little audio drama of it. And then when I started writing fan fiction, I'd read it and write about it, and that continued. So I think one of the things I say to a lot of over the years, other people who do podcasts or websites or want to get into the writing arena or whatever it is, and they say, I'll rock up at an event, and they're like, oh, you're here again. How are you here again? Because I've been writing Insider for 20 years and doing fanfic for 40 years, and I've been running websites for 30 years. And you only get to that point by doing it every day. It sounds a bit arrogant, but just doing it every day. So today, for example, as we're talking right now, I was at work this morning. So my day job, part-time, but day job is I was a stock taker. So when I did a job this morning and I come back and I chilled out for a bit and a cup of tea, and I look at the wife, and the wife looks at me and she goes, go on then. So I turn the computer on and I sit down and I start writing. So I've probably done 3 or 4 things on Fantha already. And I know for the rest of the evening, I've got Fantha to do, and I've got an ILM article to finish, and I've got a podcast to edit, and I'll be up to whatever time because I'm not working tomorrow. So I can be up with the up with the chickens if I need to be. And so, but the point is that it's just, it sounds very workman-like maybe. It's just grinding it out, because some days you are excited to get typing, like with season 2 Andor, for example. I just couldn't wait to get on and start typing about that. Even just passing on the news of, Tony Gilroy's done another interview. Good grief, really? Is there a Y in the day? Of course he's done another interview. I've got 3 to post to the site as it is. Bless him. He's out there pushing that show like crazy. So to me, I'm thinking if he's out there pushing the show like crazy, I'm going to make sure people know he's pushing the show like crazy. So I'll get on and I'll post. Other days you wake up, like anything you love. Some days it's like, okay, come on, cup of coffee, get going. And so some days it's tougher, but that's life. I mean, there's other things going on. The most key thing to me is just keep grinding it out, because it's a long game. It's a long game. And so I've been very fortunate that, because weirdly, I think that 12-year-old me had the ethos of, I'm going to read this again, or I'm going to write more about this, or I'm going to compile all the characters I've written and put it into a guide, like Raymond L. Velasco's book. I had my own version of that when I was like 13, with all my characters and planets and stuff, which I've still got somewhere. And that just moves on all the way through. So maybe it's, I don't want to say work ethic, because that makes it sound like it's a chore. But it kind of is, just every day. And I've said this to other people. Outside of me and Ruth went to Orlando a couple of years ago, and Brian, who I run Fantha with, me, Brian and Matt run Fantha. Brian says, you are not taking your computer on holiday, which I normally do. You're not posting anything to the site. You need a break. I'm doing it. So outside of 2 weeks where he took a complete control of the site and ran it himself, we've been doing Fantha 7.5 years. So outside of that 2 weeks, I've posted something every single day, at least one thing every single day, most days 6 or 7. But then, as I say, there's the insider stuff and Starburst and all the other stuff. But I love it. I get, Ruth will tell you, I get antsy if I can't log on. If the Wi-Fi's down, or I can't log on, or I can't check the site, I proper get a bit twitchy. So it's become such a part of my routine that I'm not happy when I'm not either looking forward to doing it, or sitting down and doing it, or whatever. So that's what I would say to me. But I think, weirdly, I think 12-year-old me wouldn't be that surprised that I kept going with it. Maybe I'd be. I would like to think I'd be surprised that I've done what I've done. I'd also be thrilled to know that there was more Star Wars. That we did get 1, 2, and 3. We did get 7, 8, and 9, and all this other cool stuff that happened. So, but yeah, that's what I think I would say. So just stay the course.
What's the thing that you're most looking forward to right now that's on the docket in the future of Star Wars?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm very curious about Starfighter. I think it depends on the tone. It depends on the tone of what they're going for. The thing I went to yesterday, the BFI thing, the Star Wars screening, Kathleen Kennedy actually came out at the beginning and did a little there. Actually, not on video; she was actually there, which was very cool. Because a lot of people were like, have Lucasfilm and Disney given their permission for this screening? Nobody had heard anything. And then Kathleen Kennedy came out and said, yes, we gave permission, don't worry. And it was the original, warts and all, original 77 print. And the guy from the BFI who was interviewing her on stage said, so what can you tell us about what's coming up? And she just smirked at him pretty much. Like I'm going to tell you in front of a crowd of people. But she said, I'm here because we're in pre-production for Starfighter, which starts filming in September at Pinewood. So that's exciting because we knew it was coming soon. But so I'm really looking forward to that. I mean, Gosling, I like Gosling. I think he's a good actor. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does with it. And the cast is starting to build. I don't know anything about Mia Goth. I need to do a bit of research. I've heard of her, but I don't know her work. So I need to dig into that a little bit. But I am excited about it. I know a couple of guys on the crew who've all been, this looks really good. So they're pretty savvy people. So there's a good little buzz there. I think to me, it feels like that could be the thing that Rogue Squadron might have been. And I think they desperately need a Rogue Squadron type show. Don't worry about it being like Battlestar Galactica. Don't worry about it being like Top Gun Maverick. Ignore that. They're separate. This is Star Wars, and we need that kind of Squadrons type thing. So I'm very excited for that. Clearly, the Daisy thing, I don't know where they are quite with that, but I thought she was a great character, and she's a cracking actress. So I'm really looking forward to seeing her back in that role. And I'm curious. The one I'm most nervous about is is the Mangold Dawn of the Jedi thing, because I've got a horrible feeling that could be like sort of Galactica 80 if they get it wrong. It could, because it's so far back. I'm just worried it won't feel like Star Wars at all. But then you could look at any of the modern project. You could look at Acolyte, and I mean, I really enjoyed Acolyte because it's a totally new era, and I don't know the top and the bottom of it. I don't know what's quite before. I don't know quite what's coming next. I know what's down the line, but I was kind of engaged enough to want to see, come on, season 2. Or, okay, if you're not making a live action season 2, do an animated season 2.
Sure.
Do flip what they did with Rebels.
Keep the story going, yeah.
Keep the story going. So that really got me invested enough that I want to see more without having to read a book or I know we've got a book coming out in a couple of weeks, but, that got me hooked. So I'm curious to see what they do with the Mangold thing, because I really like Dial of Destiny. So I think, and he's done some great films, obviously the Wolverine, the Logan film and all that. So he's a good director. And also slightly off track of the movies. I'm really curious to see how they celebrate the 50th, because I think that's such a big deal, and it's only, less than 2 years away now. So I think that could be very special.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait for Celebration LA to see what that's going to be like. You mentioned that some fanfic that you wrote became canon.
Yeah.
You have to tell that story. I mean, this is a big deal to us here at Tatooine Sons. When you have a porg named after your dog, you can do that. So
That's true. I used to write for Build Millennium Falcon, which was part work. So each week you get a little bit of the Falcon. You ended up building like a Master Replicas sort of studio scale Falcon. And I was lucky enough to be part of the writing team on that. So when was this? About 10 years ago. So they were a little bit more relaxed on slipping in the odd, I guess, Easter egg, if you want, or if there's kind of a gap that they hadn't defined the name of something or whatever, they would give you a little bit more latitude. That's changed now. But I did 2 issues, and the one that I sneaked my bit into was about the Imperialis, which was the Emperor's yacht from the Lando miniseries, the comic. And I worked in that the engines of the Imperialis were built by Desando Dynamics in the Cedapod cluster. So the Cedapod cluster was the region of space where all of our stories were set. There's 7 sectors within it. That was the Cedapod cluster. So we got that name in. And then Desando Dynamics was the shipbuilding company. And so I mentioned I'd write my first fiction in 82. The main planet of my own creation in that was Adesando. And so Desando Dynamics was the shipbuilding company from Adesando.
Cool.
So that was cool, because I mean, like Desando Dynamics has essentially been around for 40 odd years now. So I managed to sneak those in. So I keep meaning to drop Leland Chi a line and say, has anybody else ever used them? Because they're there to be used. Feel free to use them.
That's right.
Put it in a film. Why not?
That's right. Why didn't they show up in season 2 of Andor somewhere?
I don't get it. I mean, it's free. It's not like I want anything for it.
That's so funny. It's so funny when we were at back before in the period between when we had we had that encounter with Rian Johnson when he said, that porg's name is now Turbis, and the Star Wars Adventures 27 through 29 came out when it actually was put into canon. In that period in between, we got to visit Lucasfilm once, and we met up. We were there with Matt Martin, and we were walking through, and Leland was walking through, and Matt introduced us to Leland, and it was sort of I made this. I acted like I'd known Leland for years. I'm like, hey, Leland, and he meets so many people, he has to pretend like he knows who you are, right? Because like, oh yeah, hi, how's it going? Hey, and all this other stuff. And then Matt was like, these are the guys with the Turbis the Porg thing, and then you see him go, oh, the Turbis thing, because like that with it. And I was like, I literally sent him a letter afterwards that said, listen, we don't want money. We don't want royalties. We don't want credit. We don't want anything. We just want it to happen. Right. Exactly.
Don't you think, though, it's funny that there would potentially be, I mean, there's always one bad apple, but there would potentially be so many people like us who would be the buzz and the thrill of seeing Turbis in an animated show,
right?
Voiced by D. Bradley Baker, or they set something in the centre part, or it even gets a mention or a panel in a comic, I want nothing more than the endorphin rush. That's literally, I don't want any money for it.
Absolutely.
I wrote it out of love. I'm doing fine with all my other stuff, thanks. That's the little nod that I want. I mean, I did get a ship named after me in one of the DK guides. Adam Bray very kindly named. It was the what was it now? It was the MN-71 Changeling. It was one of the ships out of Star Wars Resistance.
That's so cool.
And it was, I forget the name of the character now. This is terrible. I should know this. It was the character that Dave Filoni voiced. And so the ship that he flew was named after me, which is kind of cool.
That's so
like
cool.
A peripheral kind of, if I ever met Dave again, I'd go, do you know? And he'd go, I've got no idea, mate.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Exactly, yeah.
I absolutely love talking with Mark. He's one of my favorite people in all of Star Wars fandom. It's always a treat to hear from him because he's someone who's not only lived through the evolution of Star Wars, but he's also contributed to it. And so here are 3 really interesting takeaways from our conversation today that really stood out to me. First, there is extreme power in nostalgia. Mark shared a heartfelt story about how a simple magazine really reignited his passion for Star Wars when he was going through a really tough time in his childhood. So dads, I know we can relate to wanting to share these nostalgic moments with our kids. It really is a reminder that the magic of Star Wars can be a bridge between generations. It sparks conversations and creates shared experiences that we can really cherish together. Second, he's seen fandom evolve. We discussed how Star Wars fandom has transformed over the years, especially with the rise of the internet. Mark highlighted how today's fans have access to a global community, and it's easier than ever to connect with others and share this passion. So as we introduce our kids to Star Wars, I think it's fascinating to see how they engage with the franchise in ways that we never could, from obviously online discussions, but there's fan art and beyond that we can experience in ways we've never been able to before this. And then finally, there really is something special about the power of storytelling. Mark's journey from writing fan fiction as a 12-year-old to becoming a respected voice in the Star Wars community underscores this power. He emphasized in this conversation that writing and sharing stories is a way to keep the spirit of Star Wars alive. So dads, we need to encourage our kids to create their own stories like we did in the backyard as kids, whether that's through writing or drawing or role-playing games or just playing Star Wars. It's a fantastic way to really foster their creativity and deepen their connection to this galaxy that we all love so much. Listen, I hope you'll keep up with Mark and all of his insights. Be sure to follow him on social media. If you want to follow him directly, it's perfect_timing on pretty much all of the channels. And of course, check out Fantha Tracks for all of your latest Star Wars news and discussions. And then, of course, as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please follow us at Tatooine Sons. Share this podcast with your fellow Star Wars fans. Let's keep this conversation going and celebrate the galaxy far, far away together. Until the next time, may the Force be with you.
Thank you for listening to Tatooine Sons, a Star Wars podcast. Please subscribe and follow Tatooine Sons on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. Tatooine Sons regularly publishes thoughtful articles intended to provoke conversation about the larger themes in Star Wars. Go to TatooineSons.com to explore further. And may the Force be with you, always.
This podcast, website, and social media accounts are not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited and is intended for entertainment purposes only. Star Wars, all names and sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items and properties are trademarks of Lucasfilm Limited and its affiliates. All original content of this podcast and website is the intellectual property of Tatooine Sons unless otherwise indicated.
Having a life scholarship and being able to afford to go to college made me feel inspired to go.
When I got a life scholarship, it was such a relief.
I knew that I wanted to have an impact. Having a life scholarship through the SC Education Lottery was huge. It gave me the opportunity to make that impact right here at home.
The South Carolina Education Lottery. A better you, a better us, a better South Carolina. Visit sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.